Some people say that Spinoza's Ethics is a difficult book to understand, but today I want to show you that this isn't true. In the fourth part of the book, he provides a mental framework to understand and act on our emotions. It's a practical guide that we can all use to free ourselves and live happier lives. As we explained in the previous video, Spinoza believes that nature is the only substance and creative power there is. So nature and God are one and the same. Nothing exists outside them, before them, or after them. This led him to say that nature is intelligible, meaning that it can explain everything that happens in the world. With that said, humans are a product of nature, and thus can be explained by the same natural laws. This is the main objective of his work. For Spinoza, we're not an exception in this universe, we are part of it. And in this view, human emotions are rational and can be understood. It's possible to define them and study them just like the laws of physics or chemistry. Our feelings then aren't irrational or unpredictable. They are logical and ordered. He says, most of those who have written about the affects and men's way of living seem to treat not of natural things, which follow the common laws of nature, but of things which are outside nature. Indeed, they seem to conceive man and nature as a kingdom within a kingdom. So what's the first major change in Spinoza's view? The first change is that Spinoza takes our emotions, desires, and passions out of the moral sphere. As a natural process, no longer be based on religious norms, but on rational knowledge. Human emotions are natural and thus shouldn't be moralized, mocked, or repressed, but understood. In the previous video, we saw that our desires originated from the conatus. This is the innate tendency everything possesses to survive and enhance its well-being. When we say everything, we refer to everything that exists in the universe, including the universe itself, atoms, stones, animals, and humans. This force of preservation comes from nature. It's nature's own power expressing itself in every being. This expression isn't random. It's part of a deterministic and rational order of the universe. For Spinoza, being virtuous and living a happy life are the same thing. Both involve living according to our conatus. To act absolutely in conformity with virtue is nothing else in us but to act, live, and preserve one's being by the guidance of reason, and on the basis of seeking one's own advantage. Spinoza advises us to do what's good and useful for ourselves. And at first sight, this might seem like he's encouraging immorality and egoism, but that's not the case at all. What is true, however, is that Spinoza opposes religious morality, which was very dominant in his time. Simply put, what Spinoza teaches is the exact opposite of religious morality, because religious virtue is focused on restraint, obedience, and humility. It's not about seeking what's good for us, it's about avoiding sin and following the scriptures. For Spinoza, this is not a sign of virtue, but weakness. True virtue resides in vitality and power. He says, the more each person strives and is able to preserve his being, the more he is endowed with virtue. On the contrary, insofar as each person neglects his own preservation, so far he is powerless. This shows that he isn't promoting immorality, but he just has a different view of virtue. And what about egoism? Spinoza answers, men who are governed by reason, men who under the guidance of reason seek their own advantage, want nothing for themselves which they do not also desire for the rest of mankind, and thus they are just, faithful, and honorable. Such men are most powerful, and insofar as they are most powerful, they have the greatest advantage in living in a community where they can live harmoniously and assist one another. This quote shows that the conatus is the opposite of egoism. Doing what's good for yourself doesn't conflict with doing good for others. We are social animals, so our well-being depends on the well-being of others. By working together and living in a society, we not only avoid dangers, but also improve the quality of our lives. Sharing, helping others, and serving the community are all virtuous qualities for Spinoza. We depend on cooperation and mutual support, not just to survive, but to thrive and reach our fullest potential. So I want to share with you an example to illustrate this point. I've been studying philosophy for the past 10 years, and it has not only made me understand the world better, but also understand myself and overcome many obstacles. It has been my main motivation to become a better person. So we can say that this is really a passion that I enjoy. However, I've never felt as much joy from this passion as when I started to share it with the world on YouTube. And even though it can sometimes be very tedious because it requires a lot of work writing the scripts, editing the videos, and filming the videos on the weekends, it still brings me a lot of joy and I've never regretted it. And this highlights Spinoza's point that sharing the joy is more important than practicing the activity itself, and that when we share the joy, our joy multiplies. And this creates a virtuous cycle, because when you feel joy and you share it, you multiply it. And when you multiply your joy, you increase your power to act. And this will make you continue doing what brought you the joy in the first place. So in my case, sharing these videos on YouTube brings me more joy, which increases my power to act. And this gives me a lot of energy to keep going, keep producing these videos, keep reading philosophy books, and keep trying to make better videos for my audience. For Spinoza, a person who lives away from society cannot share their joy, which means they can't increase their power to act. Sharing food, music, money, or advice improves your life and the lives of others at the same time. Unshared joy either doesn't grow or will eventually turn into sadness. This shows that even when we seek what is good for ourselves, it can still align with what's good for others. The good which a man desires for himself and loves, he will love more constantly if he sees that others love it also, and he will strive to bring it about that others shall love it. And this effort to make others approve of what we love is really an ambition. And so we see that each man by nature desires that other men should live according to his way of thinking. Now that we've cleared up the misconceptions, let's explain his ideas for regaining freedom and living a happier life. Spinoza places his theory of affects at the center of the right way to live. So first, what exactly is an affect? By affect, I understand the affections of the body by which the body's power of acting is increased or diminished, aided or restrained, and at the same time the ideas of these affections. For Spinoza, an affect refers to an emotional experience or a feeling that results from how we interact with the world. It's simply something that affects us. In other words, it causes us to change from one state to another. If you're happy and something happens that makes you sad, that's an affect. It's a change in our physical and mental state caused by external influences like people or events. When we experience this change, we often link it to a specific cause. However, Spinoza argues that we're usually mistaken in this association. That's why it's important to have mental frameworks to understand the true causes of our affects. For Spinoza, what is good increases our power to act, while what is bad decreases it. When our power to act increases, we feel joy. When it decreases, we feel sadness. The more our power increases, the more active we become. The more it decreases, the more passive we become. And in that state, we're like slaves. We call something evil when it causes a person to lose power over himself, to lose the power of acting. So what causes us to lose power over ourselves? Spinoza classifies two types of affects. First, we have actions, which result from us and where we are the origin. Then there are passions, which come from external causes, meaning we are affected by them but can't control them. The first category shouldn't bother us, because we are the source of those actions. However, the second category is what we need to understand and control to stop being slaves to our emotions. Just to make it clear, Spinoza explains that not all passions are harmful, because some, like love and friendship, can bring us joy. For example, he defines love as a joyful feeling caused by something external to us, which can increase our power to act. However, sad passions such as hatred, resentment, and envy are all harmful, because they reduce our power to act and limit our freedom. And these are the ones he focuses on to liberate ourselves. Each man, insofar as he is determined by any emotion which is a passion, cannot be said to act, but to be acted upon. We are passive when something happens that we didn't cause and it negatively affects us. This is what Spinoza calls the state of servitude. In this state, we are controlled by external forces and unable to act according to our reason. Being subject to emotions and circumstances beyond our control limits our power to act and in turn limits our freedom. Spinoza is a philosopher of change and action. He teaches us that when something bad happens, we should adopt an active mindset and seek to change the situation. But not only change it, we can also perceive it differently. He says that every situation has two sides, and we should always focus on the side that makes us active. When something bad happens, we have the capacity to understand it using reason and take action to transform it into something better. No feeling is permanent, so we should never be reactive. Let's take another example to illustrate this point. One day you go to work and you receive an email from your HR department informing you that you've been laid off because the company's financial situation is bad and they want to reduce the headcount. In this case, you can react in two different ways. Firstly, you can feel that this is unjust and that you've been betrayed by the company you were working for. And this would lead you to feel angry, hurt, and disappointed. And you can start questioning your behavior and your skills, and you can even conclude that you were never good to begin with. So this means you can take it personally. While you're having all these negative emotions, the reality of the situation is that you've been fired, you no longer have a salary, and you're putting yourself at risk. So by being consumed by your emotions and dwelling on the situation, you remain passive. You let your emotions control you, which will eventually worsen the situation. So in this case, you don't take action because you're sad, but you remain sad because you don't act. And this creates a passive cycle, a vicious cycle, and will let your emotions control you, will make you behave like a slave, like Spinoza said. On the other hand, you can choose to see the situation objectively. You've been laid off because the market isn't doing well and your company needs to cut costs. Or maybe also your title or your position wasn't mandatory for the company. So it's nothing personal. You can take this as an opportunity to find a better job, upgrade your skills, and start the side project you've always wanted to pursue. So you start to take courses, you update your resume, and you start to apply for better jobs. You also create a plan to work on your side project because you've learned not to depend on any company for your income. You wake up motivated as if you've been given a chance to start fresh. You become active. You feel that your power to act is increasing, which also brings you joy. You're not happy because you got fired. You're happy because you're taking action. You're moving forward regardless of the situation. You're acting like a free man, someone who wants to understand, change, and grow. Most importantly, you're free because you're not acting from a place of hatred, revenge, or resentment. You're focused on your well-being. You're being active, not reactive. And when you become active, you become the cause of your actions. So the source of your joy is within you and under your control. Understanding this helps you act from adequate ideas. Most of the time, when something bad happens, we tend to misunderstand it and blame it on the wrong cause. When we're overwhelmed by emotions like sadness or hatred, we only see the surface of things. That's why Spinoza urges us to make a conscious effort to understand the situation. Once we do this, we realize that the event happened due to a chain of causes and effects that have nothing to do with us. This understanding makes our sadness fade away and can even turn it into joy. For Spinoza, understanding life's determinism through reason helps us move from ignorance to freedom. He says, the highest activity a human being can attain is learning for understanding, because to understand is to be free. Now that you understand Spinoza's reasoning, let's take a more interesting example. Let's say you've done something wrong and you regret it. If you regret it, it likely means you also feel guilty. But for Spinoza, feeling guilty only makes things worse. He says, repentance is not a virtue. It does not arise from reason. Rather, he who repents of what he has done is doubly wretched or powerless. So what does that mean? Spinoza says that feeling guilty after a bad deed is like committing another bad deed. Guilt makes us passive and sad, and this sadness is likely to lead to another bad deed. It creates a vicious cycle. For Spinoza, this reflects our lack of control over our emotions, which is a sign of weakness. If I commit a bad deed, I shouldn't feel sad or guilty. Instead, I should take action. I should act to repair my mistake and, if possible, replace it with a good deed. I should actively understand why it happened in the first place and how I can prevent it from happening again. This allows me to start a new chain of positive causes and effects, which will make me feel joy again. Blaming yourself, dwelling on your mistakes, or resenting others are all signs of weakness. When something bad happens, we have a moral duty to act. The only questions you should ask yourself are, why did this happen? How can I prevent it from happening again? And how can I make the situation better? To finish this video, I want to share with you a passage that summarizes Spinoza's approach to living a fulfilling life. I reason and have convinced myself as follows. No deity nor anyone else save the envious takes pleasure in my infirmity and discomfort, nor sets down to my virtue the tears, sobs, fear, and the like, which are signs of infirmity of spirit. On the contrary, the greater the pleasure wherewith we are affected, the greater the perfection whereto we pass. In other words, the more must we necessarily partake of the divine nature. Therefore, to make use of what comes in our way and to enjoy it as much as possible is the part of a wise man. For Spinoza, pleasure and joy are what makes us virtuous. These are what he considered good, not religious asceticism or superstition. For example, nothing is more opposed to Spinoza's way of life than following a strict discipline that deprives us of all pleasures. However, this isn't a free pass to do whatever we want in the pursuit of pleasure. Since all our actions are guided by reason, they must be carried out with moderation. If what we do harms others or damages our health, then it's bad, even if it brings us pleasure. So abusing alcohol alcohol or drugs aren't aligned with our conatus and thus can never be good. Another rule of thumb to determine if an activity is good or bad for us is to see if it affects just one part of the body or the whole body. For example, engaging in compulsive sexual behavior for immediate gratification is an example of excessive desire. It only satisfies a physical urge and ignores a person's emotional needs. On the other hand, someone who seeks meaningful relationships is acting for their whole being. They are considering their emotional, psychological, and social needs. Finally, it's important to note that Spinoza's philosophy isn't just about action, but also about acceptance. He encourages us to cultivate a spirit of acceptance to live in harmony with the universe. In Spinoza's view, perfection isn't an ideal out of this world. Perfection exists in this world. Nature is perfect, and therefore our world is perfect. He explains that when we think nature is unjust or imperfect, it's only because we judge events based on our own expectations, not on reality. For Spinoza, everything in nature happens for a reason, even tragic events, but this doesn't mean we should accept everything passively. Instead, we should understand the causes of these events so we can prevent similar ones in the future when we can. Understanding that nature is perfect doesn't mean approving of everything, but recognizing that everything can be explained through causes, even if those causes are often hidden from us. Our intelligence is limited, so we can't always understand what happens to us. That's why we should learn to accept life how it is, and most importantly, not forget to live it, even if sometimes it gives us many reasons not to. A free man thinks of death least of all things, and his wisdom is a meditation not of death, but of life. Thank you for watching.